Hey guys, how you doing? Um, just some things I've been thinking about today. You know, Doug Ford has issued like a back to work order, right? And businesses are starting to call people. People are starting to go back to work, or at least they're being put into into this situation. When you receive that call, um, you can say yes or you can say no. But if you say no, you lose your job. And there's no guarantee that once this crisis is over, uh, you'll have a job. You'll know what's going on. And the liberals are indicating as much as possible that they have every intention of handing the society back over to the capitalist class, the death cultists. Um, and in the meantime, like the people who are currently working, right, and the people who are going back to work, they're not receiving any extra compensation for that. Uh, an obvious solution, in my view, is just to pass the basic income. Let people keep working. Uh, if you want people to work, right, then you have to pay them a wage on top of that, and we should consider it hazard pay. And telling people to go back to work, even with all of these constrictions, I mean, the fear is like everyone's pretending like, oh, we can just kind of go back to work and we have all these safeguards and all of this kind of stuff, and it's just like a complete miss on like these people have no idea how humans actually work or how they actually operate or how they actually think or do anything, right? Like you can have this enormous laundry list of safeguards and gloves and all of this kind of stuff. People will relax, right? People will relax. There's this the COVID-19 crisis is becoming this kind of people are treating it, it's becoming normalized. It's normalizing. People are settling into it. It's around and there's this whole new wave of people who are just like, "Ah, well, I don't know why we're taking this so seriously." And humans will let the guard down. Humans are not going to maintain the same level of strictness when they're out and about in their workplaces. And so this is just going to encourage a big second wave, right? Like, this is what we saw. We have the data for the Spanish influenza. People who reopened their economies and people who did exactly what we're doing, right? They experience a second wave push. And the second wave can oftentimes be 5 to 10 times worse than the first wave. But I just feel like our society hasn't learned its lesson and it's not going to learn its lesson, right? That the capitalist system is not going to work through this. And we want to be accommodating to the important essential work, but now we're being like non-essential workers are going back to work after being told that their work is non-essential in the middle of a pandemic. And it really is just, I'm just very frustrated. And it seems like the news cycle even is attempting to move on from COVID, right? I understand that people want and that there are other things going on and that people want to stop thinking about this COVID-19 crisis. But this is kind of how our society does things, right? That there's a big event or a big crisis of some kind, and then we learn nothing, we do nothing to make any permanent systemic change, and then move along as if it didn't happen. It seems to be how we operate, and I know for myself, I'm going to hold this one for a long time. That we have this basic income in front of us. We have it in front of us, and workers are not receiving it. People who are currently getting it will lose it, and they'll be told to go back to work and sell themselves to a market dominated by billionaires and millionaires that they have no hope of freeing themselves from. because we live in a wage slavery society, right? If you're being paid a wage, you're a wage slave, like it or not. And I've been told, oh, I don't think the employers think of themselves that way, and I don't care what they think of themselves as. I think of them as slavers, and it's really clear. Like, we're put into situations where we can't say no. We can't say no. And the capitalists will do anything and everything possible to ensure that we can never get into a position where we can comfortably say no to their insane demands. Like, calling people and telling them to go back to work in the middle of a pandemic is irresponsible. It's greed, and it's just money. That's all it is. I'll never forgive Doug Ford. Like, all this bullshit talk that he's done so well in the midst of this crisis, opening up non-essential services in the midst of a pandemic because you had a dip for 4 days. Not shameful. It's shameful, and we shouldn't forgive him. And we should elect people who are actually interested in our well-being and who are actually interested in freeing us from the capitalist death cult and are interested in actually giving us a chance to negotiate with some equal footing, which we don't have. We're just told what to do, and we either do it or we don't get food. So I'm pretty upset about how the news cycle is kind of moving on. In the middle of a pandemic, Justin Trudeau announces automatic rifle ban. And I do understand that is in response to the Nova Scotia shooting. I do understand that. And there are other things going on in the world, I understand that. But it really does seem like the news media is like, oh, finally we can stop talking about this COVID thing. Maybe people will forget about it. Maybe if we just put everybody back to work, give them big documents that we expect them to follow to a T, which they won't, thereby spreading the disease and guaranteeing a second wave that's going to be worse than the first. It's just so staggering to me. Just the greed of it, that people who you never meet get to decide whether or not you get put in harm's way and whether or not you are going to catch a virus that can have lifelong repercussions, right? That can have lifelong, that can do lifelong harm. Like, I don't understand how the Ford administration is not legally culpable. Right? Like, more people are going to get sick because of this. But I suspect there'll be nothing that happens to him except he doesn't get to be the leader of the province anymore, which is basically a guarantee in my view. I'm pretty demoralized and pretty defeated at the moment, honestly. I'm pretty, like the basic income is right there, and it looked as though the Liberals were going to be our allies, but now it just seems like they're interested in selling the culture back to the capitalist death cult. And if this is the way they're going to act in the midst of a crisis, like where they have this opportunity to seize this moment in order to do something important for the people of Canada, and they choose to simply keep empowering the wealthiest and keep empowering people who don't work, have no intention of working. You do their work for them. And to me, I mean, I think if you're not voting NDP in the next election, I think you're out of your mind. Like, if you're still voting Liberal, if you're still voting Conservative after this, I literally think you have lost your mind. Like, seek medical professional help. Because this society is spreading misery and death around right in front of your face. It's obvious now. And the people who are saying you should sacrifice the lives of others and yourself so that people you never meet can make a couple of extra dollars in a bad season, are death cultists. And we don't need to pretend like anything else. And if they get offended by that, then good. I hope that they take a long look in the mirror. I hope they confront the truth, the reality of what's in themselves, that they want to sacrifice the lives of people for money. I hope they're offended by that. I genuinely hope that I genuinely hope it hurts their feelings, because they're not our allies. They're not our friends. They're not trying to help us. They're trying to kill us for money. And if we let them, if we continue voting liberal, if we continue voting conservative, it's going to stay this way. You know? Like, I'm 37. I'm not going to do this for 20 more years. Just not. I'm not going to tolerate being a wage slave and being told that this is normal. I'm just not. And I think the people who thought and think it's normal, there's something wrong going on in there. Really, I think the biggest trick that gets pulled is that they're called employers instead of slavers or owners, and we're called employees instead of slaves. I think that that's the biggest trick. That shift in language that everyone seems to go along with, stupidly, is just a trick. It's just obfuscation. They're owners. They own us. They own the means of production. We have to sell ourselves to them and receive a wage. And then we turn around and we have to buy from them. And they get to set the prices. And we know for a fact that they rig the prices. And we keep catching them doing it. But nothing really happens to them over that. It's not a big deal, apparently. So it's just back to work for us, I guess. And the CRB is probably going to go away. And if the NDP has a brain in their head, they'll run on it. But at the same time, I don't necessarily have faith in the Canadian people to actually make the right decision on that. 25% of the population believes that we should sacrifice the lives of our families and our friends in order to keep the economy going. 25%. It means every fourth person you meet is in a death cult. Not a cult, a death cult. It's their intention to sacrifice people for money. And so if we put it to a vote, hey, should we maybe not do that? Hey, should we maybe build a society that sustains life, helps people, allows them to make their own decisions? 25% of the population, as a guarantee, are going to vote against it because they want you to be dead for money. That's what we're talking about. And I look at the fear that people vote with, that people are so convinced, nobody wants a federal conservative party to get in, and so if the race is close between the Liberals and the Conservatives, everybody just dumps into Liberals, right? Which is a massive flaw in our electoral system. Because if we had some kind of ranked ballot or something like this, I just know that more people would go NDP. It'd be like NDP, Liberal, Conservative. That's really what it would look like. Or maybe even NDP, Liberal, Green, Conservative, right? But it's a rigged game, right? The Liberals and the Conservatives work for the same people. It's just that the Liberals have a little bit more of a conscience. They still think that we should work for the capitalist death cult. They still think that the death cult should run the society, clearly. And just when a pandemic happened, they took a moral position for a minute. And I think there's every indication that once the medical profession says, okay, the all clear, the CRB is going to go away. They're not going to have a problem with that. I don't think so. I mean, clearly they're throwing people back into work in the middle of a pandemic, right? 1 month ago, it was too dangerous to do. Oh, now everything's cool. Now everything's cool. Because Doug Ford doesn't give a shit about you, right? Billionaires don't give a shit about you. Millionaires don't give a shit about you. They care about the money that you generate for them. That's all, right? That's all. And I hope that there is a political reckoning, and I hope it happens soon. I hope that we all take a look at this situation and we say, fuck that, fuck you, and we just oust these losers. And that's all they are. They're just losers, right? I don't understand why you get into politics to not help people. That's really what it comes down to for me. I don't understand why you get into politics if your goal isn't to improve the well-being of all your citizens, just to make money for a couple of yahoos who you barely know, and who will abandon you the second it's profitable for them. Clearly. They have no allies. They have no allegiances. Their allegiance is to money and the death cult. That's all. Okay. Well, kind of a downer, but dark days ahead. Try to stay away from the second wave.